Right, so let's look at Htmx website, go over its documentation, see what could be good use cases to use it, and general news about it. So first, what is Htmx? So basically, it's related to HTML, of course, because it's called Htmx. When you have a website and you have HTML in this website, then in order to make this the basic structure to get new data, I mean, we can host just an HTML page, and that's it. That would be a static page. And if it's not connecting on any button click or whatever to any server, then it's fully static. It's not changing the content. So the big question is, how do we change the content of web pages once the users are making actions? So if the user is making a click, the question is then, how do we change the content? For this, there were, once the user clicks the login button, how do we make a request to the server? How do we respond with the content back to the user? That is the big question, right? And for that, there are plenty of solutions, from a JavaScript AJAX request to just a button click on a form, where in the form you specify where to go in the server, and then from a link, right, an href of a website is going to make a call, get a new page, and go to that link. To React, that manages state and then changes part of your web pages. Okay, so and we have all these web frameworks and everything revolves around how do we change? How does the world change? How does the HTML page changes? Do we want to render the whole page? Do we want to render part of the page? Do we change the URL? Okay. All this revolves around these simple, basic questions, and there are different solutions for different kind of problems. And some of these solutions require you to learn frameworks and become a front-end developer with years of experience and deep knowledge in React or Angular or whatever, and deep understanding of these frameworks. This contradicts the simplicity of HTML. I mean, when you look in the simple HTML page, it's simple. Why do we need to involve all these complex frameworks, to learn them for years, to see all these abstractions? So the answer is that if you are going to maintain a whole product, then this could make sense, right? This could make sense. But sometimes you're not building a whole company, right? It's not the end of the world if you would find a way to keep the HTML page simple and add some methods to the actual HTML that would assist you in updating the HTML page. Okay, so this is what Htmx is trying to see. As you see, HTML, so it's mostly HTML, but it's extending it. This is the premise of Htmx. The premise of Htmx is write your HTML as usual, incorporate a couple of tags there that would fetch content from the server. It's not going to be super complex, such as React, etc. It's not going to be abstractions and the backend that generates things. You just want to get some content from the server, right? So just say in the HTML, I want to get some content in the from the server, just say it. And replace this div when the content arrives. You can do it with JavaScript, but do we want now JavaScript code to maintain and understand what it's doing? And so we have two languages in the HTML, the JavaScript and the HTML. So Htmx, extension of HTML. Let's continue reading this. Introduction. Htmx gives you access to Ajax, CSS transitions, WebSockets. Okay, so it's not okay. And server send events directly in HTML. So Ajax is async calls, CSS transitions is how things probably update. I'm not full sure. CSS. Let's see what CSS transitions are. Probably updates to the. Let's skip this. Probably updates to the website with CSS. WebSocket is a protocol, right? In order to make the website more dynamic, a server sent event is you open a connection and the server keeps sending you back responses. All this deal with the important thing, the important common thing to Ajax, CSS transition, WebSocket, and server sent events is that all these make websites dynamic. So what they say, HTML gives you access to dynamic website changers directly in HTML. This is what they're saying here. Using attributes so you can build modern user interfaces with the simplicity and power of hypertext. Htmx is small, 14K, dependency free, extensible, IE 11 compatible, has reduced code base size, blah blah. Motivation. We discussed it a little bit. Let's see what exactly they say. Motivation. Why should only an A anchor in the form be able to make HTTP requests? Why should only click and submit events trigger them? Why should only get and post methods be available in the HTML? Why should only be able to replace the entire screen with plain HTML? By removing these arbitrary constraints, Htmx complete HTML as hypertext. Quick start. Script src Htmx, so we include the Htmx script. And now we have here a button called Click Me. And here are the Htmx tags. We say when someone clicks the button, hx post, make a post request to /clicked and swap, replace the outer HTML of this button. Replace basically the content. Okay, so what happens when we make a button request? You see it's simple. You see it's inlined inside the HTML. We didn't need JavaScript. It looks also good, intuitive. Okay, so we are now able with these tags to communicate with the server, get back content, and change the website and parts of the website, because we said change only the outer HTML. Okay, so we have here a button. When someone clicks this, go make a post request, HTTP post request, swap the outer HTML. Okay, the hx post and the hx swap attributes on this button tell Htmx when a user clicks on this button, issue an Ajax request to /clicked and replace the entire button with the HTML response. Htmx is successor to Intercooler.js with the docs. Okay, so it looks like if you want to create something, some side project or even an internal project, I would claim also for bigger projects, this could be great, excellent, right? Especially that they are getting more and more traction. I mean, the safe bet today would be, of course, to use React, right? This would be the safe bet. But for a side project, perfect. And I can expect, it's not something totally imaginary, that in a couple of years, this would become more and more mainstream also for companies, for internal tools, it will start with internal tools and go to more places. I mean, this is something to stay, as I see it. It's not some hype. News, we are excited to announce that Htmx has been accepted into the first classes of GitHub Open Source Accelerator. This means that GitHub says, okay, here is an open source. I want to support them. I will give them $20,000. I will give them some mentoring and help them make this open source both more known, accelerator, right? Like Y Combinator accelerator for companies, this would be an accelerator for open sources. Okay, so let's go a little bit also about the documentation, and then we'll cut this docs. Okay, so this is the documentation. Let's see, they have some Ajax, triggering, special events, indicators, swapping thing, synchronization, out of bands. Basically, WebSockets and server-side events mean we get dynamically content from the server. So documentation Htmx is a library that allows you to access modern web browser features directly from HTML rather than using a JavaScript. To understand Htmx, first let's take a look at the anchor tag, anchor href block. This anchor tag tells the browser when a user clicks on this link, issue an HTTP GET request to the /block and load the response content into the browser window. With that in mind, consider the following bit of HTML. Button hxproc/click, hxtrigger, click, hxtarget, some div, hxswap, some outer HTML. This tells Htmx when a user clicks this button, issue an HTTP post request, post, to/clicked, and use the content from the response to replace the element with the ID parent div in the DOM. And the trigger for this would be a button click. Htmx extends and generalizes the core ID of HTML as a hypertext, opening up many more possibilities directly within the language. Now any element, not just anchors and forms, can issue HTTP requests. Now any element, not just clicks or form submissions, can trigger requests. Now any HTTP verb, not just get and post, can be used. Now any element, not just the entire window, can be the target for update. Target of that, we want to update something specific, some specific div. Note that when you are using Htmx on the server side, you typically respond with HTML, not JSON. Okay, so this is important. Usually when we make a request to the server, we get back a JSON. Now they say you just return the HTML. This is both good and bad. I think that for our use case, it's good because we are trying to keep things in HTML. JSON is another structure. You need to parse it. You need to decide what to do with the JSON. Now not. Just return the HTML. I like this. I mean, you can claim that by doing this, we are mixing up like presentation layer HTML with JSON data. So yeah, again, if you have a product, Airbnb or Booking.com, you might want to return a JSON, right? But if you have some internal tool or website, you might want to keep things simple. There is a boundary between having things simple and making things complex unnecessary. There are some use cases that should be complex with JSON, but there are many other use cases that should not. This keeps you firmly within the original web programming model using hypertext as the engine of application state, without even needing to really understand the concept. It's worth mentioning that if you prefer, you can use the data prefix when using Htmx. I don't think this changes anything, you just prefix it with data to make things clearer. Maybe, they didn't mention if it's doing any change. Okay. Installation Htmx is dependency-free, browser-oriented JavaScript library. This means that using it as a simple adding a script tag to your document head. No need for complicated build steps or systems. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. With React and all these libraries, you are going to a hell of dependencies that you add and builds and compatibilities in between versions. This has just saved you all of this. If you are migrating from Htmx to intercooler, please see the migration from intercooler to Htmx via CDN. Okay, so we can get it from CDN, we can get it from local copy, from NPM, from Webpack. Ajax, the core of Htmx, is a set of attributes that allow you to issue an Ajax request directly from HTML. Get will make GET request, post request, put request, patch request, and delete request. Each of these attributes takes a URL to an issue and Ajax request to the element with issue request to the specified tag to give URL when the element is triggered. Hx put to messages. This tells the browser when the user clicks on this div, issue a put request to the URL/messages and load the response into the div. Triggering requests by default Ajax requests are triggered by the natural event of the element input text are triggered on the change event. Form is triggered on the submit event. Everything else is triggered on the click event. If you want different behavior, you can use the Hx trigger. Trigger modifiers. Trigger can also have additional modifiers that change its behavior. For example, you want to request only happen once. You can use the once modifier. Okay, let's look some other interesting things. Polling. Polling is interesting. So polling would mean let's say I upload the file and this is going to take a couple of minutes and I want to show some progress. If you want an element to poll for a given URL rather than, this is could be one of the use cases. If you want an element to poll for a given URL rather than wait for an event, you can use the every syntax with the Hx trigger attribute. Every 2 seconds. Yeah, I can tell you I saw so many systems that this can make them so much simple. So yeah, we don't return JSON, we return HTML, but I think this could work. This does Htmx every 2. We can return an HTML with CSS classes and okay. Every 2 seconds, issue a get to news and load the response into the div. If you want to stop polling from a server response, you can respond with HTTP response code 286. So from the server, you can tell, guy, HTMX, it's finished. Load polling. Another technique that can be used to achieve polling in Htmx is load polling. When an element specified a load trigger along with a delay and replaces itself with a response. If the /messages endpoint keeps returning a div set up this way, it will keep polling the back to the URL every second. Load polling can be useful in situations where a poll is an endpoint at which point the polling terminates, such as when you're showing a progress bar. Let's see how the let's see the progress bar and then we'll finish it. Where is the progress bar? If the /messages endpoint keeps returning a div setup this way, so it trusts the server to keep returning this thing. And once the server returns something else, then okay, I think what is this? Well, the Htmx indicator. Okay, we can customize stuff. Can specify what is the target, we can extend CSS selectors, we can decide what do we store up. The inner HTML by default puts the content inside the target, outer HTML replaces the entire target element after begin, prepends the content, morph morph DOM swap based on the morph DOM, the original DOM morphing library. So how it animates the changes. View transition API gives developer a way to create animated transition. Okay, so this is kind of advanced synchronization. Often you want to coordinate a request between two elements. Okay, so if something just, I want something else to change. For example, you may want a request from one element to supersede the request from another element or wait until the other element request is finished. Htmx offers Htmx sync attribute to help you accomplish this. Consider risk condition between the form submission and individual input validation. Without using Htmx sync, the filling out the input and immediately submitting the form triggers two parallel requests to the validate and store. Yeah, you want first the validate. Using Htmx sync, closest form abort on the input will watch for request on form. So first it will trigger this Htmx post, validate, and then the input request. If a form request is present, starts the whole requesting flight. This resolves the synchronization between two elements in a declarative way. Htmx also supports programmatic way to cancel requests. You can send Htmx abort event to an element to cancel. So we have here button cancel, and we're canceling which request? Trigger. We specify here that we want to cancel this one. Okay, and that's it. So I think Htmx is great. I think the first use case is side projects. The second use case is internal company projects. And the third project, which requires some more examination work, is actual company projects, actual user-facing projects. But it looks like it can do it. I mean, if I look at websites and what they do, also user-facing websites, what do? They make requests to the service, right? They get some response, they update the screen, they show some progress bars, and usually that's it, unless you have super, super fancy things in which things also get complex. Maybe just leave everything to the server side. I mean, there are these single-page web apps, which I think we should be careful about. It's better to have distinct URLs for different web pages and different things, and not just a specific URL. But so in general, this is elegant. I think this should be used more often, and I hope that now that they have the GitHub acceleration on this, it would get more traction. I'm pretty sure we'll hear about this a lot. This is going to catch on fire, maybe, I think. This was Htmx.